Boa noite a todos. É um enorme prazer apresentar meu querido amigo Jeffrey Tucker. O Jeffrey eu conheço já há mais de 10 anos, 15 anos. Cada ano que passa eu admiro mais o Jeffrey. O Jeffrey, ele é, na minha opinião, o melhor evangelizador das ideias da liberdade no mundo. Para mim, ninguém consegue defender as ideias de liberdade com a ênfase e o brilhantismo como o Jeffrey Tucker consegue. Ele já passou por diversas organizações, agora ele está na AIER e fazendo, como sempre, um trabalho maravilhoso. Nós já publicamos livros do Jeffrey, vamos continuar publicando livros do Jeffrey. O Jeffrey é disparado o autor com mais artigos publicados no site do Mises Institute. Eu acho que já tem coisa acima de 60 ou 70 artigos, uma marca inacreditável. Então, é um enorme prazer apresentar o meu amigo Jeffrey Tucker.
Well, Elio, I didn't hear a word you said. Thank you for that nice introduction. Wait, was it nice? Was it a nice introduction? Okay, that's good. He's known me a long time. So, Elio, thank you for inviting me back to Sao Paulo. And I think this might be my sixth trip to Brazil. And so this makes me, well, I love Brazil and dearly love it. In fact, there was a nice man a little bit ago said, Jeffrey Tucker, you are almost like a Brazilian. I guess because I like cachaça. I don't know. But I think it may be true that I am the most Brazilian of all the American Austrians. But you know what's funny about that sentence? There are not too many people in the world I could say that sentence to who would even make any sense out of it at all. 3 different countries in one sentence. Anyway, I congratulate you for being here at this wonderful event because I think that for many of you, it may be the first exposure to the Austrian school and all that it represents. For others of you, you're still on this intellectual adventure, and I can just promise you, because I have been on the intellectual adventure of Austrian liberalism, I guess I would call it, for 30 years. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. 30 years, and it's still tremendously exciting and wonderful, and it's the best life you could ever have, to absorb these ideas into your mind and let them help you understand the world around you, which is otherwise tremendously confusing. So I congratulate you for being here the beginning of a beautiful intellectual renaissance. So now I don't have a lot of time, so I'm trying to think about the best way to use my few minutes. I would say this, that I have now, you have no idea how exciting and what an honor it is for me that I have 2 books now in Portuguese, right? 2, right? The first one is A Beautiful Anarchy, and the second one is Collectivism of the Right. Now, one book is very happy and optimistic and celebratory of a beautiful future that you will create under digital media. The second book is warning very severely about the return of fascism. So you might wonder, what happened between these 2 books? Well, I will say this. The book, Collectivism of the Right, which has a better title in Brazilian than the English title, really, was a very difficult book for me to write. I didn't like it because it was talking about sad things, and I don't like sad things. So, but I'm very proud of that book still. But to get that last book, Collectivism of the Right, out of my head, I have a new book coming out in English in 2 weeks. It's called The Market Loves You. Why you should love it back. Right? So, yeah. Okay, so what is the greatest thing about Brazil right now? I don't know. Everything's great. I had a papaya last night, like with the center of it dug out and put in a glass and put with ice and gin. That was delicious. I had a martini, which was like martini and gin. That was also delicious. I had some cachaça. This is just one evening. Unbelievable. But actually, the best thing of all is that I have taken 2 or maybe 3 Ubers since I've been here. I've never taken an Uber in Brazil. This is new, right? It's new that you can drive an Uber, you can catch an Uber here in Brazil? Yeah. I mean, this is great progress. We should be happy when we see more liberty happening. It's what I'm experiencing in Brazil right now. I think you're on the process towards reform, towards ever more liberty, because you've tried statism, you've tried socialism, dictatorship, and every terrible thing. Now there's an ethos developing in Brazil that I'm sensing a new love of entrepreneurship and the merchant class and commerce and trade and peer-to-peer technology. Things are starting to break down. The central state is starting to break down in Brazil, and that's very exciting. I think it may be more obvious in Brazil to you than it is to me in America, because we have very strange things happening right now in the United States. However, I would say this, more and more, the political struggles of the world are true in every individual country, and every individual country reflects the political struggles of the world. They have a lot of similarities. And I can tell you that I was just in Korea. You have libertarians in Korea, and then you have the left that wants to drive towards more socialism. Then you have the right that is more reactionary and longing for a past and wants protectionism and the restoration of hierarchy and the old order. And the libertarians, the liberals, are fighting both the left and the right. It's true also in Israel, where I've spent a lot of time. And I think it might be true more and more in Brazil. And it's certainly true in the United States. So a lot, I think, of what we need to do as champions of the common good, as celebrators of emancipation, of believers in the universal right to self-determination, opportunity, and choice, as people who aspire that every human being experiences a life of beauty and dignity, choice, and ownership, we are going to have to come to terms with the fact that we have a distinct political and economic personality that is not like the others. And we are going to be forever facing this left and this right. It's just true. And depending on the day, you don't know which one is actually a greater enemy. And if you ally yourself with one side or the other too much, you can find yourself losing your own personality and your own perception of who you are. So part of what I would like to talk to you about today is exactly this. Who are you? Where did you come from? What do you believe? And how does that fit in with the Austrian tradition? So I'm going to go very fast over 500 years of history, all right? Just really quickly, so we understand what liberalism is and where it came from. At the end of feudalism, feudal order began to break down due to technology, a lot of population movements. There were the religious wars coming out of Europe. At some point, the perception that the costs of fighting and struggling over trying to create a unitary state was too high. And a great experiment began to take place in Europe, and that was the experiment of religious liberty. It doesn't actually matter what it is that you believe, as long as you're willing to let other people believe what they want to believe, and let's just try the system out and see how it works. This was the dawn of this thing that we call liberalism in the world, which really, if you wanted to summarize what is liberalism, it is the belief that society is capable of its own internal self-management. That's it. Society alone can find within itself the capacity for order and peace and prosperity. And therefore, we don't need a dictator, we don't need a plan, we don't need a single religion, a single vision, a single way to organize the social order. Order comes through our diversity and out of the seeming chaos of life. And it's a very beautiful thing. It's actually the most beautiful thing you can even imagine, because it's something that both the left and the right actually deny. But as liberals, as successors to the great classical liberal tradition, we do believe it. So it was first tried on the topic of religion, but then it began to be rolled out more and more. If people can get along even though they have differences over religion, maybe it's also true that we can let people say whatever they want, let people write whatever they want, and maybe people should be allowed to move wherever they want. And then the most radical idea of all, which is that you could ascend socially through the ranks. You could be born poor and die rich. You could begin a life as a pauper, or you could rise up and become something completely different and leave a great legacy of wealth and status. That who you are is not determined by your biology or by your family history, your station in life. Nobody is allowed to tell you what you have to be. This is a very radical idea. And the people who believed that were called, often negatively, they were called liberals. And liberalism gave birth to this beautiful thing that eventually came to be called capitalism. I like the term, it's fine, but you don't have to use it if you don't like it, but I like the term. It means that you can accumulate property and invest it and create long production structures and employ other people using the division of labor, and then create complex economic units that evermore feed the ability to create wealth. And it was at that moment in history, beginning in the 18th century, very beautifully explained by Adam Smith, that we began to see the dawn of something that the ancient philosophers said was impossible, namely the development and creation of wealth, new wealth. You don't have to steal somebody else's property to get wealthy. You can make new wealth by cooperating with other people through the division of labor and through investment and through invention and entrepreneurship. This was an amazing idea, and it changed the world. It ennobled humanity. It vastly expanded the population of the world. It raised incomes all over the planet Earth, and it stopped the religious wars, and it began bringing people together who otherwise had no contact with each other because they were stuck in their tribes. Now, under liberalism, they could get to know each other, and they could trade and exchange, and we began to develop that beautiful idea of the brotherhood of man. And it was wonderful. And then some people did not like it. Beginning in the early 19th century, we began to see the revolt against liberalism, the attack. And it began slowly, and it began to develop over time. Ultimately, I think you can trace the origins of the kind of anti-liberalism we deal with in today's world, whether it's in the United States, Israel, or Korea, or Brazil, all to the ideas of Hegel, who in my own thinking, is what in Latin is called a bête noire. Bête noire, you know this term? It means a black beast, right? In my own mind, he's my black beast. Hegel. So there were two forms of Hegelianism, the left-wing kind and the right-wing kind. And I'm telling you this now because I struggled for decades to try to understand where these ideas, the anti-liberalism ideas came from. Where was their origin? I couldn't understand. Why is there Marxism? Why is there Nazism? Why is there various forms of collectivism and theocracy? And why is everybody against what I love so much? And it wasn't until I read a small remark by Ludwig von Mises, who was speaking, I think, at the San Francisco Public Library, and it's Bettina Graves collected those lectures, and Mises is talking, and he's just talking, and she's just like transcribing. And this Mises was so, that's why you have to read every single thing he ever wrote, because he's so smart, right? So, but he's just talking, and he says, oh, Hegel, he ruined German philosophy for a century. The right Hegelians became the Nazis. The left Hegelians became the Marxists. And we've been fighting them ever since. Okay, I read that, and I just closed the book, and I put it down, and I said, that is the most clear and evocative explanation of the last 200 years that I've ever read, right? It's absolutely penetrating and powerful. And that was the origin of my book, Right Collectivism, or Collectivism of the Right. Let me ask how much time I have, because I want to describe like the errors of the left and the right. I have 15 minutes, are you sure? But I want to leave time for question and answers. Okay, 15 minutes, great. All right, so here's the way it goes. I'm going to leave history behind now and describe the errors of the left and the right today, okay? So let's start with the left. And I bet when I describe this will describe some of what you deal with in Brazil. So the left in the US is constantly demanding free things. I mean, as if you think of something wonderful and you say, everyone should have that. And that's the end. That's their whole political outlook. I mean, you can't even believe it, right? It's like, wait, are you just a complete fool? It's hard to know how to respond. Right. So in the US, the left is like, well, we should have free college. Well, okay, yeah. And free healthcare, and free trips, and free steaks. No, we're against steak. Free vegetables. By the way, the left is very funny because they're getting increasingly against meat and cows. So you like cows in Brazil, right? Yeah. And meat? There's a lot of people who like meat in Brazil. So we have this politician named, she's like very fashionable leftist in the US. Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, okay? Yeah. So she's very, I don't know, fresh, charming, wonderful. Anyway, so she has this new plan to reconstruct every building in the United States, completely eliminate fossil fuels, and reconstruct all buildings in the entire country, plus get rid of air travel and abolish the cow. Okay, so this is what we're dealing. Oh, but also have free college and free medicine and free beer and I don't know what. Free Cabernet Sauvignon. So it's all just slightly silly. So what is the problem with the left? There are many problems with the left. I mean, one is that they're enormously annoying. Okay, but beyond that, and they're always telling you what to do and what to say and what to think, and they ultimately have this identity politics. It's just truly horrifying. But so the problem with the left, I think, fundamentally, is that the left, and this has been true since about 1820, the socialists in the 19th century were the same way, is they don't understand scarcity, right? By that I don't mean shortage, I mean the fact that you and I can't own and control the same piece of property at the same time. And that fact alone means that we have to either fight for it or we have to figure out a system to voluntarily trade for it. Now, this might sound just ridiculously simple to you, but I don't think that half the population in America understands this basic point. There's no such thing as socialist ownership of scarce goods, right? So I've been trying to think about like how to explain this to people. And so I'm working on an article right now, and it sounds ridiculous, but what I'm suggesting is that anybody who believes in socialism should start with just one thing, just one good. So if you're sitting around with your socialist friends, you should, and there are 3 of you, you should just like decide you're going to have socialism in shoes. There's 3 of you, just like let's have socialism in our shoes. It's like, okay, great, let's do it. All right, our shoes are now socialistically owned. Okay, well, I want yours. Oh, wait, they're mine. Oh, they're socialism now. Well, then what makes you get to have them? Well, I mean, because I really like them. Yeah, but I really like them too. And the third guy says, yeah, I like that guy's shoes. He says, no, I like these shoes. Well, I like your shoes. And so you can immediately see there's going to be a huge argument over ownership of this. And you'd think after about 10 minutes, one of the guys would say, you know what I'm thinking? I think it's possible that we can't create socialism over our shoes. And if we can't do that, we should get rid of the idea entirely. Maybe the whole idea of socialism is completely false. And they would say, yeah, I guess that's right. Why don't we have liberalism instead and just become libertarians? Okay, right? That's the way the evening should end, right? But that's probably not the way it's going to be. So this is the problem. Like, scarcity is a huge fundamental fact of economics. It's maybe our most basic thing in the world. Like, if you don't get scarcity, you probably haven't even understood the first principle of economics. And I'm sorry to say that like, this is probably the most important principle. It's not possible to have common ownership over any scarce good. Okay. All right, so let me just move to the right now, because this is like the subject of my my book, Collectivism of the Right. The right wing really grew up in reaction against, let me just back for the left wing. The left wing hates commercial culture. It just does. Like, the left will never reconcile itself to freedom in the commercial sphere. I don't know. I wish they did. I wish they could. But if they did, they wouldn't be left. They would be merchant. They would be liberals, all right? They're not, so they can't. I'm afraid the same thing is true of the right. The right's origin is like a reactionary idea, or in France, revanchiste, or in Germany, nationalist, Bismarckian, or in the United States has many different terms. In interwar Europe, some people call the collectivism of the right fascism. I don't think it's I don't think that's an incorrect description, really. But it's revanchist in the sense that the collectivism of the right resented the progress that was made possible by the advent of liberalism. Liberalism created a kind of world that was without control, where the poor could get rich, where non-aristocrats were able to live noble lives, where you could go to the store and buy any clothes you wanted to dress like a king, where your station in life was not determined by birth or biology, but rather we lived in a world of endless opportunity. The right really resented this because it meant a decline in the power of the nation state, the king, and the church. And so the Hegelianism of the right sought to restore the power of the Prussian state and the Prussian church, and to crush the ideas of human liberty. That's, over the course of the 19th century, it got ever more perverse and started landing in strange ways, and Carlyleism in Britain, and Ruskin and his hatred of commercial society, and in the US with the racist, eugenics, segregationist movement that was locking down labor markets and making it impossible for people to move, that ended up in anti-immigration movements in the early part of the 20th century. It's all very bitter and terrible. And we thought we had gotten rid of it. And only just a few years ago in the US, I believed that, if we could just get rid of the problem of left-wing ideology, we would be left with a beautiful anarchy, and then the whole world would celebrate liberty. I was wrong. There's another way station in this process towards liberty. Namely, we faced a collectivism of the right. People who proclaim a resentment against the left, but have an agenda to resurrect the power of the nation state and to make the nation a collective on the march under the guiding hand of a great and strong somebody. And you know, he has a name. You might have heard it before, right? And so he is this great leader. So what's strange about collectivism of the right is that it has basically these three principles in our time. It's got a lot of bad stuff, but if you wanted to strip it down, it's about stopping immigration, number one, for the purposes of creating a unitary population that's loyal. It's protectionist and mercantilist, meaning that it wants very high tariff walls to keep out foreign products, and it believes in basically executive dictatorship, all right? So in 2015, I was explaining this in great detail and warning people about what was going to come. But everybody said I was crazy. But you know, it's not crazy, because you can watch history and see the ideas tracing themselves forward. Once you get this paradigm in your head, everything is like having a crystal ball. You can see everything unfold before you. So I knew exactly where this experiment with Trump was going to come, where it was going to end up. So, like, many people supported him because he was against the socialists, right? And that's good to be against the socialists. And his first year, he said, oh, let's have some deregulation and some tax cuts. And people said, oh, that's wonderful. But then in 2018, he began to be his true self. And I can tell you that I think what's happening in the United States right now is extremely dangerous for world peace and world trade. The tariffs are getting worse, they're getting higher. Tariffs, by the way, are always taxes on the domestic population. Like Trump will tweet, I've imposed tariffs against China. No, you haven't. You've imposed taxes against Americans. That's all it is. And for what? For what? To restrict the division of labor. So if I were going to sum up and there's so much more I could say about Trump's tariff policies, which are getting increasingly crazy. I don't know if you know this about the US, but we have gigantic agricultural subsidies. Like, we produce whole mountains of corn and soybean, and we don't know what to do with them. You're probably getting some in Brazil very soon. You'll see it. They'll just be arriving in trucks. You'll be flooded with American corn in no time. But so now he says that with all the money he's making from tariffs, he will buy the corn from the American farmers and send it abroad as humanitarian aid to the world. So you're probably getting lots of shipments of American corn very soon, courtesy of Donald Trump. You know. Anyway, the problem with the right is that they never have understood the division of labor. And I have to just leave it there. If you don't understand what I just said, I highly, highly recommend that you go to Adam Smith. Is Wealth of Nations in Portuguese? So, it is a great book by a great author, okay? You should read it. Like, don't read mine. Like, read Adam Smith before you read me. Okay. All right, well, let me just leave you with this, because we're going to take some questions here. But now I just have to speak to you from the heart, okay? Because some of you in this room, maybe all of you in this room, are the hope for the future. So the problem with being engaged in ideas as you are is that you are looking very carefully at politics and the state of the world, and sometimes you get sad about it. sometimes you get cynical. It seems like the bad guys are always winning. That if you lie and you cheat and you steal and you manipulate people, you will be rewarded with political office and power. And it gets depressing. But you know what? And I can promise you this. The one thing that the bad guys in this world, the statists and those who oppress others, the one thing that they always underestimate, and they do not know how to fight, is a combination of two very powerful weapons. The first is clear, rational thought. We have to have that. We have to read, we have to understand. We have to be able to explain, observe, elucidate, and enlighten. The second thing we need is absolutely essential, and it's going to take everything you have and maybe consume the rest of your lives, but it is worth it. And it is the following thing: moral courage. Moral courage. Never give in. Never tolerate the lie. Always speak truth to power. Be intransigent. Never relinquish your rights or your mind to anyone. Speak with courage. Always face your enemy, face to face. You will be amazed. I've seen it again and again in my life. I've been a cynic too. I thought, this can never work. What I've seen is when great people, and Mises is a good example of that, stand up for what's right and true, power, not immediately, but over the long term, it dies. You will be the killer. And through your efforts, you will resurrect the prospects for liberty in your lifetime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Convidamos ao palco o moderador, diretor operacional da rede Liberdade, Guilherme Moretson.
Hello, do you hear me? Please, Jeffrey, have a seat.
Okay.
So, I already got complaints that I don't have a tie. I'm so sorry. I'm dreadfully sorry.
Somebody say that to you?
Yes, someone. Anyways, Jeffrey, it's lovely to have you in Brazil once again. I'll start with the questions. There are lots of questions. The first question I would like to address is by Alois Schmidt. You talked a little bit about the wealth of the nations, yeah, about Adam Smith. But what do you think about Ayn Rand?
Oh, well, I have a great affection for Ayn Rand. I mean, you have to, you know what, this is true for everybody. Get what you can out of great thinkers, and then if you don't like something, just throw it away. I mean, like, so, but Rand was wonderful because she understood the power of envy like nobody else. In many ways, she was like a moral thinker. And she saw this one truth, that people will resent your success in life. And I can promise you, everybody in this room, if you succeed, you will be suddenly surrounded by people who resent it, right? And so she got this better than anybody else. So I am personally a fan. I also like the fact that she always deferred to Ludwig von Mises on economics. So that's important.
Great, thank you very much. Second question, Jeffrey, in an imaginary world where we are all free, what would be the best currency system, in your opinion, considering those three options? Bitcoins with a Lightning Network, BCH, or gold?
This is funny. This is a funny question. Okay, Bitcoin with a Lightning Network, I don't think. we're quite there yet, I'm sorry to say. What was the second one? BCH?
BCH
Look,
or
yeah,
gold?
no, that's, and you probably know that I like many of these cryptocurrencies, and the third one is gold, right? I like gold too. You know what? This is a funny question because you know what? Here's the thing: it's not for you to decide or me to decide or for anyone in this room to decide. If we have the perfect system, we would all get to choose our own currency, and that's it. That would just be the perfect world. I don't think we need a single standard. The big problem with the gold standard of the late 19th century is that it was a kind of a government imposition. Is Larry agreeing with that, what I just said? Okay, he nodded his head, okay. I'm afraid to even talk about, like, even say the word gold in history in the same room with him, and ideally in the future, we would have a completely decentralized system where you can make and choose any currency you want, and I would just love that. Wouldn't that be so beautiful if you can wake up in the morning and just decide you're going to use this global currency or that global currency? And I think we're headed that way eventually. Central banks really can't last in the new age of currency competition because central banks are premised on the idea of monopoly control of money. They have to. You have to have all the banks running through their banks, all the money running through their banks, and they're supposed to control it using macroeconomic formula and stuff like that. If we have more and more competition, then the central bank really loses its rationale for anything other than the clearing system for the nation-state currency. But other than that, it's not serving really the purpose it was historically intended to. So I must say that the single greatest thing that's happened in my life is the invention of Bitcoin, actually, because it changed everything for me. Yeah. Yeah. It made me realize that we can have the Hayek's ideal, which is the denationalization of money. Until Bitcoin, we didn't really know how we would get there.
Yeah, by the applause, I can judge there are some millionaires on the audience already. But yeah, so this would solve two problems at the same time. Yeah, you trade wherever you want and you close all central banks. So it would be also very good. Two problems, one solution. Jeffrey, the person didn't say the name. Do you think worldwide centralized agencies and institutions originally intended to avoid wars and conflicts like the UN, European Union, etc., are weapons of mass destruction aimed at the individual rights and civil liberties? And also, do you think there is any way out of this situation?
So I don't think I entirely agree with the claim in that first one. I don't think the UN has that kind of power. I think the purpose of the UN was to keep nationalism at bay, and it has not done a very good job of it, really, especially recently. But something like the World Trade Organization, that was really designed as a kind of tribunal to stop states from exploiting each other with high tariffs and protectionism, okay? Clearly, it failed. I wish that the WTO, World Trade Organization, was more effective than it is. Ultimately, my friends, your enemy is your state. That's it.
Okay. Now, a question by Mr. Paulo Rezende. Jeffrey, what do you think will eventually make coercive institutions obsolete? If that's even feasible, technology, culture, or any other thing, what should we expect from this?
I definitely feel like the state as we know it is a 20th century thing. I mean, you have to think back. In the United States, in any case, in the late 19th century, we had no income tax, no central bank, no passports at all anywhere in the world, no labor regulations, nothing. All the horrible things we associate with the state are very much a 20th century thing, you know. And what that tells me, it's got a very short life, and I think it's on its way to dying because it can't survive the technological change, for one thing, and also the cultural change. You know, I think all over the world, States are ever less popular. In the US, this is actually true. I'm just going to say this. You're not going to believe this. But when they took public opinion polls in the 1960s in the United States, they would ask the question, do you trust the government to do the right thing? And 60% would say, sure. This is a very stupid people, right? Today, that number is something like 8 or 9%. So it's like this, right? This is a dramatic change. And this change is happening all over the world. States are not popular among any people. I go in the whole, everywhere I go in the whole world. And it's not just like hanging around anarchists, although I love to hang around anarchists. It's not just the anarchists, it's everybody. Nobody likes their politicians, their state, because they're not viable institutions. They suck, and they're doing a bad job. They just do a bad job. They cost too much. They perpetuate injustice. And now in the age of information, we're learning about this more. They cannot survive under the age of this change. But we also have to have not just hatred of the state. I love hatred of the state, but we also need to foster a new love for liberty in the world. And I think that's our main job. It's like, okay, the state didn't work. What does work? That's where liberalism, I think, needs to come into play, and that's where you can play a big role in helping to educate yourself and others. And this is, I think, the way we're going to achieve it. It's not one thing, right? So it's technology, but then also dramatic cultural change and intellectual change. Yeah.
Great. I thought it was a world phenomenon that people love the state but hate the politicians, but nowadays people hate the politicians and the state together.
It's true, yeah.
But I think we still have time for one last question.
Okay.
His name is Luis, didn't say his last name. He says, I got a lot inspired by an article of you in Portuguese, a message for the unemployed young people.
Oh, yeah.
And I would like you to comment a little bit about the obsolescence of the decadency of the higher education with the expansion of knowledge.
The decadency of higher education? Is that
yes,
what it is?
the obsolescence and decadence of the higher education.
Some people feel a real calling to go to university life, and I think for them it's very good. Like if you need to pursue a particular skill, like
don't forget we are on university.
Yeah,
Otherwise, next year we don't have a place to host the event.
Look, you have to have a reason to be here. That's my main point. And unless it's to really foster the life of the mind or pursue a particular profession or some purpose, then you shouldn't. I think people should move on with their own professions. I'm not sure what it's like in Brazil, but the U.S., most of the kids in college could probably just be doing something else, and therefore saving themselves like $100,000. All right, maybe that's not true in Brazil. But if you are in school, you should use every single minute of your life to educate yourself and read and learn and prepare yourself for a great life. And that requires taking your classes seriously, using every minute you can in the library. If you're working a second job, then that's a job on the side. That's also really important. But just don't waste your time like an American drinking yourself to death. This is basically the American experience in college. So it's very, very sad. So I think probably there's better ways to do it. But I'm very pleased to remember this article about advice to unemployed workers. I need to redig that thing up and elaborate on that a little bit. It's very sad to me in America that young people are, despite 3.6 unemployment, are enormously demoralized. And I'm not sure I understand entirely why that is. I think it has to do something to do with a lack of life aspiration. And that comes down to the individual. Do you know this guy, Jordan Peterson? Okay, he's really helping to inspire young people to have a purpose in their life. I will see him, we're speaking together in Budapest in 2 weeks. So I've really appreciated his message because he He helps inspire people to have some reason to be alive, some purpose, and very importantly, to have an aspiration. You know, to long for a better life and to have a burning desire to achieve it. That, I think, is also part of liberalism. That was part of the liberal ethos that came out of Europe. It's like, my God, I've got freedom, I've got rights, I've got opportunity. I'm going to make the best of my life, and nobody's going to stop me. To me, that is a great attitude. I think it's something that that we need to resurrect today. So, all right.
Mr. Jeffrey Tucker, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your lecture.
My pleasure. All right, thank you so much. Thank you all so much.